We visit author and thinker Joe Amato at his home in Marshall, where he reads poetry for us and reflects on his path through life.
Black crow and white snow. Along the edge of the golden cornfield struts a big black crow. He leaves tracks in the melting snow. Undaunted by my approach and the flinty shine of my shotgun, he stands certain, black and brazen, cawing, 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 declaring with all his blackness, there comes a season when you will take coughing steps towards death across the solitary winter of your own. My name is Joe Amato, and I'm a writer and a thinker. I was brought up in Detroit, Michigan. My family constituted new Sicilian immigrants, so I knew that world. I knew the world of immigrants. And then my grandparents from Wisconsin gave me an insight into who American rural people were. So perhaps I had more than I was aware of. And I worked at a soda factory, Faygo Soda Factory, inspecting bottles, hauling around cases. I would guess through work and mixing with people, I developed a fairly rich portrait of American society. I went to the University of Michigan, which is about 45 miles from Detroit. At the university, I didn't know exactly what I was going to study, so I would more or less say I took up ideas in confusion and tried to sort them out. I got pretty good at it, and at least if good is complicated, I could read fairly complicated things, and I could get my head into fairly complicated problems. I went out and taught high school for a couple of years. I decided I really wanted to think a little more about life, its meaning, and work with more ideas than I had the chance to work with in high school. So I went to Canada, Quebec City, and at the University of Laval, I got a master's degree. My classes, if might interest someone, were in French. My exams, fortunately, were in English, but all my classes were in French. And I got a call from a fellow named Maynard Brass, great friend, later to become a great friend, and he said, "How would you like to come out here for an interview?" So I flew out to Southwest. I was here for a day and a half, kind of liked the place. It was dang near a brand new college. This was the fall of '69 was the third year the school was open. And it was the first year they really brought in a lot of faculty and hordes of students. Yeah, along with a fellow I mentioned, Maynard Brass, who had one foot in history and the other social science, I helped found the history program. By that I mean we defined the curriculum, we defined what was required for the students, we shaped the seminar, and that curriculum has basically stood the test of time. I think they're still basically using our basic structure and our basic idea of the seminar. The more I studied history, the more I believed you are of the place you live, and the place you live feeds you. But I knew as an historian, if I gave the place where I lived a history, I would feed it. People live there, but they don't fully bring it to consciousness. And I began to think so much could be brought to consciousness. And little by little, I would write, say I started writing a book on who I took to be the farm people of our area. Then I wrote on a murder. Then I wrote on the Jerusalem artichoke circus. Then I wrote, with a great deal of courage, I wrote a book on the decline of rural Minnesota and started to openly speak about that in 1988. and then finished the book just after the 1990 census. And then I went on and wrote about the new people who lived here. And then with many good colleagues and many good students, we set out intentionally to give Southwest Minnesota a literature. Our literature included a book on the floods of '93 with Professor David Bukowski in the English department at Southwest. We've written essays and photographic essays on the area, and there's just simply no end of subjects I find curious and interesting in a place. So the place gives me life, but then I hope I reciprocate and give the place life by giving it words or ideas for it to talk about itself. We've lived in this house since the fall of 1977. This was always a large room, and when we got the ping pong table out of this large basement room, I began to slowly but surely secrete books along the walls. When you're teaching courses on the history of sport, the history of death and dying, the history of Italy, the history of Germany, introduction to social sciences, 19th century Europe, and the list is just wonderfully long. And you have an eye for books. Well, they overflowed my office. I've also spread it to other places in the house. And it hasn't fallen out into the neighborhood, though. I've not taken over any neighbor's house, although some live in dread that he will come with all those darn books and fill up our front room, too. A squirrel that's as old as I am learns many little crevices and little crannies and places to store nuts. And if he's a half-good squirrel, he remembers where he stored those nuts, especially in the winter. I met Kathy, my wife, in Rochester, the university hospital's cafeteria, and we took a walk. And as we walked, we started to talk. And coincidence is the mother of relationships. I guess we got married in '66. So that's we're moving towards our 50th, which is surely a monumental event. It's monumental, if for no other reason that it involves 50 years. But we've gotten on all that time. Kathy, the wind moves on the lake, poplar leaves spin, martins test their darting flight, our children rush in and out of the water, and we walk with easy steps. I have 4 children. Felice is my oldest. She's a girl. She's about 44. I have a son who actually presently is teaching at the university, teaching primarily geography. He's second. And then I have another son, Adam, who's a computer man, and he lives in Minnetonka, where my youngest daughter now lives. And we have grandchildren too. So we have 5 grandchildren. So I have 4 children and 5 grandchildren. So I'd say having a family and children, well, not without its necessities, embodies or gives a person a body, and that allows you to live. And better to have good bodies around you than nobodies around you. What legacy would I like to leave? Well, I never can solve that, and I rethink it probably 13 times a day and probably don't come up with a good answer, any of them. But in the most ambitious way, I'd like to think I help people think about what their lives are, what their inheritance is, and hopefully that makes them more lifeful, vital. It gives them, it gives them a fuller deck of cards. to shuffle things around. That's my idea for the